So I put a post out on Instagram asking you guys to ask me anything for a Q&A video. Here we go. So this YouTube channel is going to be 10 years old later this month, only in a few days time actually. I can't believe it, and in that time I have never ever done a Q&A style video. So I thought I'd post something out there on my Instagram story and see what questions you guys have. And that's what today's video is about, answering your questions. If I don't get back to any of them, please do drop them in the comments below. And if you have any further questions after watching this video, feel free to drop them down there. I'd love to hear your questions and I'd be more than happy to answer any of them. So without further ado, let's get into this. What's your training like during the week of a marathon, and how many rest days too? So for context, I would normally train on a Monday, Tuesday, rest Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, rest Sunday. So I'd normally do 5 days a week, but on the Tuesday I tend to double. Nothing tends to change on race week. Everything in volume just comes down. So instead of my sessions and long runs and stuff like that, I do a Monday easy or steady, and that would come down to 60 minutes. And then Tuesday I do a very small session, something like 4 by a mile, 4 by 3 minutes, something like that, with an easy double in the evening. I still rest Wednesday. I think I would do, what did I do last time? I'm sure I did like a very small 45-minute moderate run on a Thursday, steady zone 2, and then Friday easy. And actually I tend to throw in an extra run that week. I just go out on the Saturday and do 20 minutes in strides or 30 minutes in strides, and then I'll race on the weekend. If you could only run one race, what would it be and why? That's a really good question. I think I would go for the marathon distance. I'm not 100% sure which one I choose. At the moment, I am very, very, very fixated on Valencia. I'm not doing it this year. I'd love to go and do it. I'd love to do a couple of the marathon majors, but I'm not overly fussed on completing the marathon majors. I think they're too expensive. There are a couple that I'd love to go and do in the States, particularly Boston and New York. Those are the two that I really like to do. And out of those two, it would probably be Boston, just for the history and just to say that I've run on those rolling hills. It would just be so awesome. I know it's not particularly a PB course, but just to say I've done Boston would be amazing. But I'll be honest with you, I would much prefer something like Valencia. I think the flat and fast nature of the course, it really, really appeals to me. So at the moment, it's Valencia. What motivates you to get out on the crummy weather morning run, please, mate? Really good question. Okay, I'm going to give a really weird answer to this one. I'm pretty confident I'm on the spectrum somewhere, and I very much thrive on routine. I need routine, and if I don't have my routine, I really, really don't feel good in me. So my routine is simply a case of like, I just love to run, and I want to run as much as I can within the realms of possibility with my lifestyle and all of that stuff. And so it is quite easy for me to get up in the morning regardless of the weather. I just layer up. I've always told myself that our skin is waterproof, so if it's raining or whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's not always appealing, but it really doesn't bother me too much. But it is that constant motivation of, I have a different mindset when it comes to training. My mindset's changed over the years, and it tends to be now a case of, if I'm in this training block, I always tell myself, don't think about the gains you're going to get from this training block at the end of this goal race. Think about what you're going to be like in a year. Think about what you're going to be like in 2 years. So I always try and play the long game and think to myself, well, if you get up this morning and you get this run done there and you consistently do that, then you're going to be a much better runner this time next year and this time the year after. So it's just little things like that, routine plus that kind of mindset shift of, I'm not worried about what happens at the end of this block, but I'd love to think that the consistency will pay off in the future. That's another reason, and that's another thing. Cole Hocker, Josh Kerr, or Jakob Ingebrigtsen? To be honest with you, I would choose either Jakob or Cole, for the simple reason of, I've always followed Jakob. I love their style of training. Obviously, I'm starting to implement some of it now. I'm a massive fan of learning and understanding training methods, and the Norwegian method, Scandinavian method, whatever you want to call it. It really does kind of fascinate me, and I've had and seen some good benefits myself from just doing a sprinkling of the training. So I'd love to commit to it, and I feel like, as someone that's shown that using that training method can get you onto a world stage, which, let's be honest with you, a few years ago breaks the narrative because so many people didn't train like that, and now it's becoming a lot more mainstream. I've always found that fascinating. And Cole, to be honest with you, If you remember, and if you're an OG, I guess, you might remember some of the old Ben Crawford videos from 5-6 years ago with Cole and Cooper and just all of those guys. I feel like I've followed them for absolutely ages, and I've got a real soft spot for Cole and Cooper, and I just really want to see them do well. And so to see Cole's kick in that race was absolutely unbelievable. I mean, I'm sure Josh is a wonderful guy, but I feel like I've got more of a connection to those two. How do you stay motivated and to keep running at such a good level? Well, I appreciate that's my friend Gav. I appreciate that, mate. I wouldn't say I'm at a good level at all, but what I would say is as I said, I think I'm on the spectrum slightly, so I have this hankering to continue my routine, and I love the feeling that it gives me of getting better. Like, I love a year from now looking back at some of my runs and going, oh, I'm running that better, or I'm feeling that well. I mean, one of the things that I always try and ground myself with is I might be out on my long run, I might be chugging away at 6:30, 6:20 per mile pace. My heart rate might be really low and I might be feeling really good, and I'll just go, just take a minute and appreciate the moment you're in. All that training has got you to a point where this pace that many years ago used to feel really hard and was unfathomable, now is almost borderline easy. It's not even zone 2. You're sort of like, it's sort of in that middle area, and you're feeling really, really good. And so going downhill, but you know what I mean? You just feel sort of like, wow, you have those gratitude moments, and I love that feeling. And those gratitude moments keep me grounded, and they keep me wanting more, and they keep me wanting to get to, like, okay, I want 6 flat mile pace to feel like this. So like, I know that in a few years time, if I keep at it, then 6 flat mile pace, and then I'll be running at 6 flat going, this is nuts. Years ago, this used to be my target marathon pace, and now I'm cruising at zone 2 in it. So those sort of things sort of keep me going. Are you going to run Paris Marathon one day? I'd love to. It seems like a great event, and plus it's just over the channel, nice and easy to get to. One of those ones that I'd love to tick off one day. Do you think you'll ever do a sub 30 for a 10k? Honestly, I'd love to think that it would be possible, but no, I don't think so. I think if I continue, I mean, I'm 37 now, so obviously I don't quite think I'm at my peak, but I know that I'm not far away from the decline. So I'm very aware that unless I start right now getting my mileage up to 100 plus miles a week, safely, of course, and continually stack block after block, which doesn't look likely at the moment unless YouTube becomes a full-time thing, then I don't think it's going to happen. But I'd love for next year, this time next year, to be consistently in the 32s. Once again, I've tried it this year. I've managed to get my 5k time down, so I'm hoping that will reflect in the 10k time. 5 times mile repeats. What pace do you recommend for marathon training, please? 10k pace? Thanks. It depends what point you're putting those mile repeats into the training plan. Like, if you're putting them in the early stages of the training and you're sort of like, not even 12 weeks out from the race, you're like 13, 14, 15, 16, you're in that early stage, then yeah, you could definitely consider doing something like 10k to half marathon effort. But I think if you get closer to the race, you're better off extending to something like 6 to 8 by a mile and doing that at a more controlled effort, like half marathon effort with a smaller recovery. You're just going to get better benefits from it. I think going out and thrashing 5 by a mile close to a marathon at sort of a 10k effort, you're going to get benefits, but I would complement it with a longer marathon pace session. So my answer would be, in the early days, in that early phase, yeah, absolutely 10k pace would be absolutely fine, and have a slightly longer recovery, maybe 90 seconds, 2 minutes. But if you are thinking of doing it close to the marathon, I'd consider half marathon effort, extending the number of reps and shortening the rest. How would you make entry in the major marathons like London, Boston, etc. more democratic? Where do I start with this one? Well, I think I'm going to have to be extremely careful with what I say here. This is a twofold question. I'm not going to go into detail. I feel like the marathon majors are overpriced. Some of the prices to get into the races are absolutely nuts. If you think about, like, okay, so I went to Barcelona this year. I think my entry into the Barcelona half marathon, considering there was like 16,000 runners there or something like that, was like 38 euros, maybe even less than that, which is nuts. You look at the price of some of these, I mean, London is creeping up every year. I think I paid about 80 or 90 pounds for last year. I know New York is huge, £200-300 to get into it. So there's a massive issue in getting into the race, not only for qualifying, but also the cost. Let's talk about the cost first. The cost of these events is just too much. It makes it very unfathomable for a lot of people, including myself, to get to these events. A lot of people say earn more money. That's absolutely fine. I understand there is that argument, but I feel like social media is not helping. social media influencers are not helping, to be completely honest with you. I've always been a social media person, as you've probably seen by my race vlogs and stuff, that loves to mix small local races with bigger races. So this year, like I've done London, I've done the Saucony London 10K, but I've also done a handful of local races. I'm very much in favour of supporting local races as much as the big ones. They deserve more attention than the big ones, in my opinion. That's where the grassroots running comes from. That's where supporting our local athletics clubs comes from. And I feel like that's really important. That's why I'll go and film those races and, I guess, in a way, give them a bit of promotion inadvertently by me doing it, because I'm doing a race video about it to showcase the course, because other people might go, oh, do you know what? I fancy doing that next year. And that makes me so happy, far more than going, I love the fact you ran London this year. I want to do that next year. So there's an argument for both ways in that. The money aspect is one thing. In terms of getting in to it, and again, I won't dive deep into the social media aspect because I'll put myself in a load of hot water. But I do feel like social media glorifies these marathon majors too much. But in terms of getting into them, I guess, oh God, I've got to be so careful with what I say here. I'll keep it really short and sweet from a London perspective. Too much charity, okay? I feel like there's a place for runners and charity. I feel like the balance has way outweighed on the charity place. I feel like the balance needs to be brought back in line with runners and charity. That would open up more spots for runners. I think that's one thing. I will say I'm not anti-qualifying times. I feel like for the right mentality of people, it will make them go, I want to qualify for that one day, so I'm going to work my arse off to make sure that I can get the qualifying time. For the wrong type of people, it'll make them sit and moan and whinge. So again, that's a strong opinion that, again, some people won't necessarily agree with. But I do feel like in some of them there should be some cases where outside the qualifying time you can go into a ballot and a draw. Like, for example, Boston, you have to qualify with the time. It'd be great to see Boston allocate some places to just a random draw of people, so it doesn't have to be you have to run this time. It'd be great to see like 90 or 80% of the people get in through the time, but then a 20% allocation for people that would take a lifelong dream to run it. So there's that aspect, but there's just so many ways. But do you know what? Honestly, it's all about the money. Money talks, and that's the problem with these events. So let's move on after getting myself into a ton of hot water there. So the fans wish to see another live stream with the wish to see another live stream with the Dynamic Duo. So that's my friend James, and if you don't know, again, the channel's been going 10 years. I said it earlier. I think like year 8, 7 or whatever it was, maybe even 9. We used to do live streams together. It was brilliant. It was great fun. He used to come around my house. We used to do live streams. It was brilliant. I will be honest with you and say the one thing I wish I could carve out some time to do is weekly live streams again. Obviously, I tune into a lot of Mike's live streams, and I'd love to be able to do the same because I just found it such a good way to actually physically talk to people rather than through in the comment section to live answer questions and have a genuine conversation. I found it great. So hopefully one day they'll come back. Favorite non-race day shoe of all time? It's going to be either the original Nova Blast. I still remember how good that felt. Ran 400-meter repeats up to long runs in it and everything in between. One of the best. Brooks Hyperion Tempo, Brooks Hyperion Max are up there. I'm going to say the original Nova Blast version 1's got to be the one. What shoe has held up really well for you, and what shoe feels the best for wet weather? Well, the first one that comes to mind, I've just mentioned the Nova Blast and the Hyperions. The Brooks shoes, I think they've been the best because even though the grip is quite minimal on them, I've always found it to be really tacky. I've used them in all sorts of conditions and I've had great success. So from a longevity perspective, they're not a daily trainer that will last you 600-800 miles, but I've got 400 miles out of my first set of tempos. Second set of tempos over 300, and then that was mirrored in the Hyperion Maxes as well. Over 400 in the first pair, 300 and something in the second. And from a grip perspective, like there was no weather that I wouldn't trust those shoes in. As a taller and big-footed runner, how do you find getting your size? I struggle, absolutely. So a lot of you guys know, some of you won't, but a lot of you guys know there's a lot of brands that don't do my size. So I'm a UK size 13, US 14. I don't know what that is in EU. Is that 49 or 48.5 or something? But a lot of brands don't go up past the UK 12 when it comes to their racing shoes. So there's a lot of racing shoes like in Asics, can't try the Super Blast or any of their racing shoes. Brooks, I can't try their racing shoes, but I can try their training shoes. New Balance have even stopped doing a lot of, like, if you go on New Balance site and filter by UK size 13, they've got like 3 options of shoes that I can have, and none of them are any of the new ones. Who else is there? Adidas are sometimes hit and miss. They're getting better, but they are hit and miss. There's plenty of other brands out there that I struggle to get racing shoes in. And so for me, it's just a case of having to stick to the brands that I know. I know that Nike, I know that Saucony, I know that Hoka, they'll have my back. They always do my sizes, so I tend to look in those brands first. There are some other ones as well, but for me, those are the go-tos. What's the best way to train with a shoe with aggressive rocker? I have the Saucony Elite, they hurt after 15K. That's a really good question. And actually, when the Elites came out, I was really hesitant to try them because I heard a lot of reports that people's calves and Achilles really hurt with it. Touch wood, I've never had an issue with the Endorphin Elites, but with super shoes in general and aggressive rockers, I think the consensus is calf exercises. What you'll often find is the plates in these shoes, not necessarily with rockers, but any rocker with a plate like the Elite that's really stiff, it takes away that natural movement, and often it doesn't deactivate the calf or Achilles, but it stops them working in their normal way. There's been numerous studies that have proved this. And so a lot of calf exercises. This is why the Elite, I think what happens is on social media, we see the Elites train in a lot of racing shoes, and we as amateur runners think it's okay. And actually what we forget is they have the time to do strength and conditioning and have a proper program, or most of them do. So they will strengthen their calves and Achilles in other ways, and they don't rely on the shoes to do it, if that makes sense. So often what I find is calf raises, I've heard, and other calf exercises, a great thing, and calf drops are great to do to help you. In terms of aggressive rockers in daily trainers, I often find that without a plate there doesn't tend to be an issue because the foam tends to sort of mold to you a little bit more, and it's not quite as rigid. But when it comes to the racing shoes, especially like the Elite, calf stuff is going to be really important. How to avoid and fix hot spots. SL2s are annoying me. Wow, that's you and me both, mate. But the SL2s I've now seems to fix. So there's a couple of things that I like to do with shoes. I'll relace them. I'll loosen the laces. Okay, so let's go from the beginning. The base of the lacing system, I'll tend to loosen those up. So I'll loosen all the laces. I'll really pull those apart as best as I can at the bottom. I had to do it in the Saucony Endorphin Pro 4 and the Speed 4 because I was getting some rubbing between my toes in those, which was highly unusual. But having relaced those and pull those apart, and then so having them laces tight at the top and loose at the bottom, that's fixed those. Done exactly the same in the SL2s. Then if that doesn't work, I have pulled out the insole of the SL2s, and that has fixed the issue for me. So I'm running without an insole in those, and they're now extremely comfortable. But I'd say if you're still getting hot spots on the base of these shoes, then you have to look at doing the runner's loop or the lace lock, whatever you want to call it. That will really lock your foot in and stop it sliding around. And if you're still getting it, then I would question the size of the shoes that you're running in, because it sounds like they may be too big or too small. Best 5K racing shoe in your opinion? Really good question. I would have said the Vaporfly version 1 or 2. I now say the Saucony Endorphin Elite. But any one of those three for me have always been the best. So like in terms of the Alphafly style shoes, Alphafly 1, 2, 3, that sort of thing, I find them really good. I've had good training in them. I find them really effective. I personally like something really aggressive. So I want something with a carbon plate, but I want something that feels aggressive. The Vaporfly for me is always a go-to. It's actually, I've been using the Vaporfly version 2 recently, which is the version of the shoe that I wasn't a huge fan of. The upper fit isn't great, and I feel like the midsole has slightly changed a bit, but because it is virtually the same geometry as version 1, I get that same aggressive nature in the shoe. And so I feel like I can really run well in them. And I actually still have a box fresh pair of V2s, luckily, which is crazy. So I will break those out if I need to. I've still got some pairs. I've got 3 pairs, and I've got one of them that still has a bit of life left in it for racing. But I'll be breaking out the new pair of V2s if I need to, maybe next year, who knows. But for me, yeah, those are the 3 options. And the final question for today came off Strava. Amazing that you can run at such a pace with a low heart rate. Would you mind sharing some tips? Thank you. Now, the reason I put this one in there is because I get it quite a lot, but the reality is I think it's just a case of stacking training block on top of training block on top of training block. So obviously years of running, 10 years of running now, doing a lot of Zone 2 work as well. I talk about it a lot. I divided opinion in my recent Zone 2 training video. I had a few dislikes on that video, so I know a few people didn't comment but weren't too impressed with it, which is absolutely fine. I get it, not everyone likes it. A lot of people still like to do the 80-20 rule, 80% really easy, 20% hard. That's just not how I train. I'm not interested in that type of training. If I ran 100 plus miles a week, I'd probably find my training sways much more that way. But at the moment, we're running 60 to 70 miles a week. My running is much more condensed, and so I condense my runs and try and maximize the mileage that I do. And so with that in mind, doing a lot of zone 1 and zone 2 running, more zone 2 than 1 actually, which is moderate or steady running for me, over the years I feel has really contributed to all of this. A good example of this, obviously, if you compare like myself and Matt Rees, the Welsh runner, I'm sure a lot of you guys have watched our videos together. We'll often go out and do steady state runs on the trails, and I can often keep up with him, match him, and often feel quite good about it. Like, I know that my aerobic development, my aerobic system is really well developed, and I've got a really strong base. Put us in a race, and obviously Matt can run a 107 or 108 half marathon, and I'm a 113 runner. He can run a 31 low 10k, and I can run a 33 low 10k. So, you know, there's a massive difference there, and that shows me as a runner, if I look at myself, that I have an extremely strong base. I've got an extra, you put me on the forest trails and I'll go and run for hours at a relatively decent lick and not get too tired. But then when it comes to racing, obviously my performances are way subpar compared to Matt, as an example, and you look at that and you go, well, your thresholds need more developing. Like, you need more speed work. You need more speed development. Let's call it speed development, because there's so many buzzwords around. You need to work on your thresholds. You need to push your thresholds up, my boy. That's I think, if you looked at me as a runner and you put it on paper, and you've got to be brutally honest about your own running, which I can be. I can analyze myself, and I can very much admit where my flaws are and where my strengths are. My strengths are definitely wind me up, put me out on the forest trails, and I will run for hours, give me a few gels, and I'll tick away nicely. But you put me in a race, and as I said, I would say, let's say my thresholds are underdeveloped. All right, so I need to do a lot more work there to make those a lot stronger, hold faster paces for longer. I've had some good success with that this year. I'll continue to chip away at it. Obviously, some people are more naturally gifted at running faster. Some people are much more naturally, I'm going to say, talented. I am definitely not one of those people by any stretch of the imagination. I have to work doubly hard to get to where a lot of people are. So yeah, I think that's the answer to the question. Lots of training blocks stacked on top of each other. Lots of consistency has gone into that. So there we go. That's answered all of those questions. I hope that helps. Nice and honest. I'm sure I will get some interesting replies to this, but you know what, I've got to the point now where I just feel like I am me, I am who I am, and I will answer the questions how I feel, and so I have some strong opinions on a lot of stuff, as you've probably just heard. But I hope that answers your questions, and if I've missed any, please do drop them in the comments below and I will answer them. Or if you want to see me do another one and you want me to pop a community post out on YouTube for you guys to answer some questions, I'm more than happy to do another one in a couple of weeks time or a few weeks time, whatever it might be. Otherwise, we'll leave it there, guys, because I'm sure this video is ridiculously long, and I will see you guys on the next one. Thanks for tuning in. Please do give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe. Do all that good stuff. See you in the next one.